Before the video starts, I just got approved for YouTube membership, so if you're interested in that rather than Patreon, then it's available. I made a level for 99 cents because I know how difficult it can be to pay for stuff nowadays. This is just an option for you. You do not have to donate any money, but leaving a like and a comment on my video would be great too. Thank you.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
On August 20th, 2010, my mother collapsed and stopped breathing. Her boyfriend called 911 and then my dad at work. My dad called me at 7:30 a.m. to tell me what had happened. I had just gotten back from sleeping in my car all night after a fight with my husband. My mother was an alcoholic, so was her boyfriend. My first reaction was that it was more of her drama and that she probably fell down drunk or had a seizure and that she was fine. I dropped my son off at school and then headed over to the mobile home park she had recently moved into. As I turned into the park, my stomach began to swim. I suddenly had a bad feeling. The paramedics were standing outside of her mobile home. She was either fine or dead. I had a sick feeling that she was gone. I walked up to the paramedics, who looked pale and apprehensive as the 7-month pregnant woman was approaching them, crying. I asked if she was gone, and they nodded. I walked in and saw her body on the floor by the foot of her bed. She was covered with a bloody sheet, and I refused to look under it. The cause of death was acute liver failure due to excessive drinking. She was 48 years old. She never got to see my son, who was born 2 months after her death. I did get the chance to say I loved her 2 nights before, but it preceded a bad fight about getting her life together. My drinking was also out of control. When I got pregnant this time, I swore I wouldn't let it get as bad as it was again. Unfortunately, I would break down occasionally and guzzle 2 or 3 beers once a week while pregnant. My relationship with my husband was, and still is, a nightmare, and we had to move back into my father's home with my brother, which resulted in constant fighting between everyone. I strayed from drinking heavily for a few weeks, but it quickly caught up with me. My home situation was, and still is, wearing on me. It's been 18 months, and I drink enough some nights that I black out and not be able to do anything the next day. My son missed school today because I just couldn't get out of bed, and here I am, drinking some more. I haven't gone a day without a drink in about 2 weeks. Some nights I drink 4 or 5 beers, other nights I drink 10. I am so tired. I love to drink. It relieves my anxiety. It gets me to sleep. It makes me want to be social and to enjoy things. My drug of choice is hydrocodone, and I actually drink much less when I take it, but I only get so much a month, and the other days I have to fend for myself. I just don't see an end to this, and I cannot believe I would let alcohol take over my life, as it destroyed my childhood and robbed me of my mom. It's a sad story. Alcohol is not evil, but people need to understand the power of drugs and to respect it. It can sneak up on you. Trust me. I am updating my report, written almost 1 year ago, about my alcohol addiction. I had forgotten I had written it, probably because I was high on Xanax and drunk. I had my 3rd son this past November. I cut down on my drinking, but did not stop while I was pregnant. I allowed myself only 2 beers a night except for 6 different occasions when it was 3. A third of the nights, I did not drink at all. My son was born healthy and happy. He hasn't had any problems thus far, thank God. Obviously, I still have a problem though. It took a couple weeks, but I am back to my usual drinking habits. I think it may even be worse. The funny thing is that I don't even really like drinking. When I take hydrocodone, my drug of choice, I hardly drink at all. I wish I could take that all the time instead of drinking. I also take Zoloft every day and Xanax when the anxiety is unbearable. I know that if I don't stop drinking or cut it down, it will shorten my lifespan. How can I keep doing something even though I know it's going to kill me? Like I said, I don't even enjoy being drunk all that much. To me, it feels chaotic and overly emotional. The reason I think I drink is that it tends to my boredom and anxiety. It's what I look forward to every day. I just focus on getting through the day until I can drink at night, which has been the story of my life. I hate it, and yet I still drink. I wake up every morning with fear, guilt, and just being plain sick from a hangover every day. I know that only I can stop my drinking, and I plan to attend AA meetings to help. My advice is to be careful. I have 3 children, and I will tell them about our family history of alcoholism and how it took my mother's life, and that I need to get help myself. This report is just one story of several similar, but distinct dives into some of the deepest pits of mental anguish I have experienced while withdrawing from chronic binge drinking. A bit of background. I am a male, 29 years old, and am well seasoned with psychedelics and started my experimenting from the age of 16, including LSD, mushrooms, MDMA, DMT, 2CB, and others, and have had my share of difficult experiences. When I try to explain to people that some of the most tormenting and nightmarish headspaces have come from withdrawing from alcohol, people generally have a hard time comprehending how that can be possible. I became a chronic drinker and what some may call an alcoholic at around the age of 20 after a difficult and traumatic life event had left me with a, then undiagnosed, anxiety disorder so debilitating that I had lost nearly all of my ability to function socially, to the point that leaving my home was enough to trigger a panic attack, and this started to affect my work life, friend life, family life, etc. I should add that I was one of the vibrant, though a tad naive, happy-go-lucky types that had a lot of friends and was almost like a big kid, totally unaware of some of the dark and covert dangers that lurk in the world. So I was always benignly trusting of people. I was an open target for sociopaths to prey on. I was to find out. So after certain events left me a shell of my former self, and long before I was to get proper diagnosis for an anxiety disorder and PTSD, I was in a confused and damaged, debilitated state. And though I never really liked drinking prior to this era in my life, maybe once or twice a month at a party, and was much more keen on smoking cannabis, I remember one sunny afternoon having a few drinks with a close friend, and it was almost like magic. Those few cans of beer took away my anxiety, and I felt like my old self again. It was truly like a miracle for me, and this was the beginning of my dependence on alcohol. Naturally, over a pretty quick amount of time, a few beers daily turned into a few shots of harder stuff during the day, turned into a bottle a day, turned into multiple bottles at all times of the day and night over the course of about 2 years. Though in the beginning, I was social again, and my friends were happy that I was back and attending get-togethers again, and able to work and just function in general. Slowly but inevitably, the alcohol started to take center stage in my life, and I was to again sever my relationships with friends, family, and work by not only doing some incredibly stupid and hurtful things that I wouldn't even be aware of in my drunken state, but also putting my drinking before any other aspect of my life, even my closest best friends who love me the most. Now, I was a recluse again, for a whole other reason. So, I'm in my mid-20s, now jobless, and still living with my parents. I was a chronic alcoholic who was living to drink and drinking to live, much more than any sane person should drink. A doctor would have been horrified. Fast forward a bit, I knew I had a problem with drinking and that I needed help. All in all, I would go on to have 4 stints in rehab from the age of 25 to 29, and up until today, I am currently, knock on wood, still sober. But the nature of alcoholism and addiction in general is that if left unchecked, will undoubtedly creep back into life. The story of my nightmare withdrawal experience begins, funny enough, right off the heels of my second stint of rehab. I had just completed rehab, and naive as I was, I thought I now had the knowledge to be able to handle my alcohol and drink like normal people again, like I used to once upon a time in my life. So the very afternoon I returned home, I went straight to the liquor store, picked up a Mickey of my favorite brand of vodka, and decided to celebrate. It, of course, only took a matter of weeks before my controlled drinking, once again, became unmanageable, and I was back to my usual all-day, all-night drinking, alone in my parents' basement, style of life. Some binges would go on for 3 or 4 days straight, no food in these times, no showering, brushing my teeth. I wasn't even leaving the house to pick up more booze, but just having it delivered to the door, as this was the early days of the lockdowns up here in Canada. I would be truly isolated and was physically and psychologically dependent on booze. There were times during these periods where at the end of my binges, I was too physically ill to even drink more, but much too ill to eat, save for a few granola bars and protein drinks and the occasional fruit, and I also couldn't sleep. Those were the times that I would experience the slow and excruciating descents into the hell and madness of alcohol withdrawal psychosis. I truly wouldn't wish those states on my worst enemy. It would always begin something like this. I had just come off another long bender of drinking for several days and nights with little food and sleep till I couldn't drink anymore. Then, I would feel it start to come on, and I knew what I was about to go through. It would start with an increasing sense of paranoia. Every noise that a house usually makes in the middle of the night was amplified tenfold. Every creak or crack in the walls would make me jump, and my mind would tell me that it was someone trying to break into the house, or police, or other shady agents were stalking me and had been following me for years, and were finally coming into the house to get me. When I would make panicked phone calls to family or the crisis line, noises of audio crackling in the phone were the agents tapping the calls to listen in on my conversations. I would stay up and just sit in front of the security camera monitors at my parents' house, just waiting in horror to see if anybody, or indeed anything, was walking around the house or trying to get in. By this point, I would have turned on every single light in the house, and I triple-checked to make sure every door and window in the house was locked, because what might have hid in the darkness terrified me, and I would just sit in idle silence, listening, waiting for the inevitable terror to finally meet whatever was coming to get me. Then, as the mental paranoia would progress further, I would begin to go into a psychotic panic state where I felt that whatever terror I was trying to evade was now inside of my head, reading my thoughts, and I felt like I could not escape, and not even my very body was safe. And I would squeeze my head with my hands and pace around in circles, hyperventilating, just to try to get some solace, some escape from this mounting stress and panic. Eventually, I would escape into my room, pull the blanket over my head, and try to sleep this state off, and when I would close my eyes is when the real hell would begin. This is when I would start to have delirious visions, waking nightmares, and see entire film reels begin to play in front of my eyes. Visuals that would even, dare I say it, match those of certain psychedelics in a dark room, closed-eye setting, only of a much darker, much more gruesome nature. Again, I say they were like film reel projections, very flashy and shuddery and grainy in nature, but specific in their color tone and content. The alcohol withdrawal visuals always have a specific mood and feeling associated with them for me. The feeling of impending doom, mixed with somehow feeling like I was in hell, doomed for eternity. and that these projections were coming from a dark psychic alien entity that was communicating them to me. A sense of futuristic intelligent nightmare mixed with apocalyptic scenes of eternal death and destruction. I would usually see film reels of faces that looked like they were speaking, then would suddenly be split in half or mutilated like they had been attacked by a machete or mauled by a rabid animal. Or a reel of somebody walking unnaturally fast, then transforming into a black shadow entity that would just stand and stare at me in an odd posture. Some images were like watching grainy film of the piles of dead bodies like the Holocaust. Some were of destroyed cities and screaming families crying in place or running for their lives. I saw images of bodies being cut open in the most horrific way and people dancing with the innards of said body, dogs attacking and tearing people up, and also people cutting open a tied up hanging dog. There was also scenes of a sexual nature on display, people having orgies and odd BDSM types of sex, but nobody seemed to be enjoying themselves. It was like these people were sex machines, if that makes any sense. That was the feeling of the images: sex, death, hell, and bloody despair. Every gruesome manner of death, despair, and depravity you could imagine was in those mental projections. But the oddest things I would see were the more vivid, more brightly colored images of giant insects. I'm talking right up close, looking at them in the face type images. But these were not ordinary insects. They were humanoid insect figures and seemed quite intelligent and even telepathic. Don't ask me how I figured that. That's just the vibe I would get. And I would feel that these futuristic alien insect beings were ones beaming these mental images and feelings into my psyche. But it wouldn't even stop there. Another common theme in these delirium states were the reptilians. Similar to the insectoids, the reptilians were also physically invading my head, but instead of beaming in odd images or just simply looking inside of my head with cold calculation, the reptilians were overtly malevolent in the vibe they gave off. They would appear as half human, half reptile entities and felt like they were attacking me somehow. Their nature seemed to be more brutish, more unforgiving, and much meaner. It was like getting attacked by a creature on an old school Doom game. I would hear their groaning and grunts in my head, like a predator honing its focus on me. These reptilian hallucinations would even follow me into the open-eye world, where when the mental torment of keeping my eyes closed under the blanket would become too much, and I would open them and throw the blanket off of me, and I would look into my brightly lit room and see almost translucent but still flashy in nature hallucinations of the reptilians standing around in my bed. One time, I remember looking towards my window and seeing a snake-like humanoid entity float into my room and quickly disappear. But more so than seeing them, I would feel their presence around me, and it was terrifying. I would feel several large beings around me, feeding into my fear, then simultaneously consuming and feeding off of that fear in an amplifying feedback loop. Variations of this condition would last through the worst of the withdrawals, and unfortunately, the only way to stop it was to drink more alcohol. During these periods, I would stay up all night until the sun would come up, and I could hear the rest of my family walking around the house, and only then did I start to feel some semblance of safety start to creep back in. This is usually when I would, full of shame but also stricken with panic, ask and plead with my mother or father to let me have some of the alcohol they had put away for me, for when I would get into these states, just enough to get me somewhat level-headed again, and out of this delirious state. Reluctantly and painfully, they would oblige, seeing what alcohol addiction had done to their son, and the mental pain of my current suffering in that moment. Episodes like that happened many times over a span of many years. I would go on to attend rehab 2 more times in following years, with my longest stretch of sobriety being about 8 months. I am currently 3 months sober as of writing this account, and I'm picking up all of the pieces of my shattered life and working towards rebuilding it. It's not easy, and again, I wouldn't wish what I have gone through on my worst enemy. Not just the delirious states, but the damage overall that alcohol has done to every aspect of my life and self-esteem. Please, if you think you have a problem with alcohol, seek help. You're not alone, and it truly does feel better on the other side. It is tough work, and it's okay to slip up many times like I have, but don't give up on yourself. You can make it through the dark night, and you don't have to look back. And for anybody who thinks alcohol is a benign drug compared to some others, just because it is legal and culturally accepted, remember to enjoy with caution. It really is easier than most people think to slip into dependence and full-on addiction to the substance. I'm by no means trying to say don't drink and don't have a good time. I'm just saying to be aware and use common sense and discretion when choosing to indulge and to treat alcohol with respect, for it can be a very powerful and cunning substance that can consume your entire life. What an incredible story that just was. I mean, it just goes to show you what alcohol can really do to you. I am fortunate enough to not get addicted to it. When I turned 21 in 2020, I would drink every day. I would go to the liquor store once or twice a week. My favorite thing was Jameson whiskey or Tullamore Dew. I would go through 1 or 2 bottles a week. I can't remember, but I was drinking every day. I'd go to work and I was super hungover, and I just can't believe I did that to myself. Luckily, I've stopped drinking. I drink occasionally, like once a week, maybe even once every couple weeks. I'm not even sure. It doesn't happen too often anymore. Not even at restaurants. Like I usually went out and got some kind of drink with it, like a margarita or something, but now I just get an unsweetened tea with my meal. And that works out just fine. You don't need alcohol. Alcohol is one of the worst substances out there, and no one wants to admit it because everyone does it. And like this guy said, it's okay to drink every once in a while. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like getting fast food. I mean, fast food's bad for you, but getting it every once in a while isn't too bad. But yeah, the things that alcohol can do to you is just crazy. Having said that, be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video so far. If you haven't already, of course. You hear that every video, so yeah. Also comment down below what you think of this video and any experiences with alcohol you might have. Alright, let's move on to the next story. I live in Finland, and at the time, was living in an apartment building. I drank straight booze and strong beers for at least a month from when I woke up until I passed out. At the end, or when my psychosis kicked in, I was in the shower. I heard banging, music, and people aggressively screaming at me to quiet down. And I swear, I heard the words "percoline percoli" or "devil's devil" in English. Then I got out of the shower and tried to fall asleep since it was nighttime. But I heard music from the apartment above that was threatening to kill me or asking for me to move out. After that, I stood up from the bed and investigated the situation. Then, I heard the man going outside and playing the same music while revving a chainsaw and yelling. I then called the emergency hotline and went outside of my apartment to investigate. Then later on, I thought the man was running and screaming towards me, and the police tried to take him down, so I ran away from this imaginative chaser and hit my head on some railings. After I was sure the man was gone, I went into an ambulance, and only then was the psychosis cool. I felt all of the drugs I've taken before to kick in one after another. At one point, I felt like I was stoned on weed, then suddenly, I felt like I was on acid, then came the speed. I was sent to a mental hospital. From the hospital, I continued to have paranoid auditory hallucinations for weeks on. By the way, I am only 20 years old. Monday, 7:30 a.m. I chugged a fifth of vodka and got smashed. Normal routine for me. 10 a.m. I decided to chug another fifth, not routine, and from there, I blacked out. Next thing I know, it's 5 p.m. I went to the liquor cabinet and found it empty. Oh shit, I had no money left, so I knew what comes next. Hell. I knew it was going to be a rough night, but not like I ever expected. One should know that I haven't touched alcohol since this happened, and I pray for those who still suffer such an affliction. Anyway, I'm sure you heard about pink elephants. Well, it's not true. They are actually demons, horrible demons. When the withdrawals began, I began to shake violently. This was normal for me, considering that I went through it several times before. Then I blacked out again, which I didn't expect. I can only assume that it was a seizure. When I came to, it was around 2 a.m. That is when the hallucinations began. I was sitting on the roof of a Victorian-style house looking at the ground approximately 3 stories below. Sitting next to me was my fiancée. The funny thing is that she died 3 years prior. I've been drinking non-stop since. She pointed to the lawn below and said, "You should be down there, not up here." After that, she transformed into a nightmarish thing that I couldn't possibly describe in words without crying. It then picked me up and threw me off of the roof. When I fell to the ground, it hurt. It actually happened? Not likely, but when I came out of my delirium, I realized I was wandering around in my neighborhood and there was a huge gash on my head. I had lost a lot of blood. I happened to have my cell phone with me, so I called myself an ambulance, in which they treated me for my injury and detoxed me safely with Librium. Today, I am alcohol-free and happy. As correctly expected, there was some hard toll to pay for the excess that I logged in. Biologically, I am an alcoholic, yet I often go for very long periods, months, without getting drunk, and even for years without going on a binge. As my drinking career has progressed, though, my body's ability to process alcohol has certainly changed. In the present case, I had the following experience. Initially, nothing much different than a regular hangover, other than particularly heavy sweating, some quick heartbeat, but far, far worse, because not present in mere hangover, were the psychological effects of what is clinically known as major withdrawal. Terror, and what I found worse, auditory, tactile, and visual hallucinations, which were sometimes indistinguishable from everyday sounds, feelings, and sights. These included the humming of bees, the dripping of water, the strange reflections of light, but sometimes utterly surreal and nightmarish, morphing shapes, and certain creatures that all humans deeply fear. And it was these that produced sudden and even greater near-total confusion, heavy sweating, and a frenzied heartbeat rate. The onset of auditory hallucinations began exactly 24 hours after my last drink. All especially horrifying because there is no drunkenness to mask them. They appeared in the light of day and instantly led me to believe that I was going insane. Thank heavens I had spent the last few of those 12 days tapering down, and I had eaten a lot the day before cessation, and had taken mega doses of vitamins, and had drunk much juice and water, and, needless to say, no alcohol. So, I lay in front of the TV in order to keep my mind somewhat focused on a fixed reality. A surrender to stream of consciousness would have entailed very nasty things, which nevertheless visited me, yet in a previously unknown intensity. The worst period occurred during a period of about 4 hours, between hours 42 to 46 after cessation of drinking. This began with the visualization of geometrical patterns, not so bad. But the visions quickly became ones of putrefaction, horrendous scenes of decay and filth, worms squirming from the eyeballs and the like. I found myself writhing and trying to focus on thoughts of my loved ones in order to dispel these visions. Scorpions, snakes, all of these things, just dropping onto my bed. I would swat at them, only to confirm that they were not real, yet the momentary terror became manifest. I kept seeing the extremely rapid descent of something down the outer edge of a heating pipe that runs through the ceiling of my bedroom down to the apartment downstairs. This went on for 4 hours, yet it felt like an eternity. 49 hours after cessation of drinking, right after this most terrible withdrawal, I fell into a deep sleep. All in all, classic alcohol withdrawal. Yet, when it happens to you, there's nothing normal about it. During days 3 and 4, I did achieve the sought-after state of clarity. I was able to discourse on philosophical topics. I am a philosophy professor by training, with remarkable precision and even insight. This state, I suspect, is perhaps a ruse of the drug, occurring exactly when neurochemistry has more or less successfully adapted to the drug. On the other hand, I might be wrong, as people on very, very long stretches of addiction also report achieving such a state. I got through it, but it was the most horrendous 24 hours I'd ever experienced. Think you know what a hangover is? Good. I curse the day that this substance came into the world.